everyone, I'm here with your astrology for the month of March 2022. So it's been an interesting February. We can't move forward with talking about March without talking about the Pluto return of the United States that happened on February 22nd. And of course, what's obviously going on in the world with Russia and the Ukraine. So I thought something might happen around the 22nd because of the Pluto return, but also, those kind of slower moving aspects, because Pluto moves so slowly, things don't always happen like exactly on that day, right? It's been going on. The Pluto return, if you don't know, is the Pluto's coming back to the point it was at when the Declaration of Independence was signed. So that's what a return is when a planet comes back to the point it was at for a birth chart, or in this case, the birth chart of the United States. So Pluto takes 248 years to go around the sun, and on February 22nd, it was at the exact point it was at when the Declaration of Independence was signed. So I don't always expect something to happen maybe exactly at that point in time, but we watch for what happens around that date, because often things that happen around those kind of dates can indicate where things are going. And they're like a seed that gets planted that sprouts later. So, for example, at the beginning of January 2020, Pluto met up with Saturn. They are conjunct together in the sky. And a lot of astrologers knew that this meant that something particularly difficult was probably going to happen, and that 2020 would be a difficult year, even if they didn't know exactly how. So nothing seemed to really happen on that date. However, news started to emerge around that date of a new virus that had come out in China. And of course, we know the end of that story, right? Or not the end, but we know where that story has gone. However, with the Pluto return on February 22nd, nothing maybe particular happened, big news in the United States, but we obviously have, Russia attacking the Ukraine. And I think that is going to have long-term implications for the United States in some fashion. What that fashion looks like, I don't know. I just know that it has something to do with the long-term power dynamics of what's going on in the United States. Looking too at sort of the news in the United States, we also had, some governors sign some pretty restrictive bills on people's rights and the rights of what teachers can teach and things. And I think that also may have some long-term implications for what may happen in the United States as well. So we'll see how it all plays out, but we can't really move into talking about March without kind of just talking about that as well, because as we move into the first week of March, we're gonna, March is a very interesting month, we'll say, as I drop things. So we'll go through it. It's an interesting month, and it's a month I think that is both, it's like a good news, bad news month. There's some intense and difficult aspects, but then there's also like hope as well, and optimism too. So I'm curious to see how March is going to play out for everyone. So on Tuesday, March 2nd, which is when I'm going to upload this, I'm recording this on Saturday, February the 20, what day is it today? The 26th? The 26th. So Tuesday, March 2nd, we have a new moon. It is at 12 degrees of Pisces. It is a very optimistic new moon. It is conjunct, meaning together in the sky with Jupiter, the planet of luck and expansion. And it's also sextile, which is an easy aspect with Uranus, the planet of chaos and change, but also inspiration. So it's like we are really inspired. We're inspired by a dream. We're inspired to expand our minds. We're inspired to connect with people on a spiritual level. There's a sense of oneness and connection and inspiration, because Pisces rules things like romanticism, idealism, spirituality, music, art. It can also be about fantasy as well. So this can be about wanting to escape into fantasy, but it's this very optimistic energy. But on the same day, we also have Mercury, the planet of communication, conjuncting with Saturn, the planet of rules and restrictions. So it's like there's sobering news of some kind, or news that we have to work within some restrictions, but there's also this strong sense of optimism and hope for something better. The next day, Wednesday, March 3rd, we have both Mars and Venus meeting up with Pluto. Now, Mars has been kind of together with Venus for a little while, and then they're going to be exactly conjunct, later that week. But when Mars and Venus are together, it's usually very passionate. There's a lot of passionate energy that could be used for good or bad. When it meets up with Pluto, though, both of them with Pluto is a bit unusual. And Pluto's about power, Pluto's about death and transformation. And when Mars meets up with Pluto, this can be expressed in good or bad ways. A good way to express it is by taking action to change power dynamics in a good way. The other way is you can bully people. It can be about the abuse of power. And when it's together with Venus, Venus with Pluto, again, can be used in a positive way where we empower people through love and empower ourselves through love and beauty. But it could also be about using seduction or using temptation to abuse power. So I think that there's going to be some element of both of those things around that time. We're going to see potentially the abuse and misuse of power, but also people trying to use love and take action to empower others as well. So, a lot of intense energy the first week of March. On Sunday, March 6th, Venus and Mars meet up together. They're conjunct exactly in the sky, and they both move into the sign of Aquarius. So they go from Capricorn, which is a very earthy type energy, into Aquarius. And Aquarius is a more detached energy. It is more about the common good and the community, but it can also be very rebellious as well. And it's good to rebel with a cause, like if you're going for something in a good way, but if you're just doing it for the sake of it, that's when it can be destructive. So I'm going to pick my cards up off the floor. So, for example, here, this is the Oracle of the Radiant Sun, if you're wondering. We have here Mars in Aquarius is rebellion is the key word here. And I would definitely agree with that. So there's like this rebellious energy, this energy to like take on the system, to challenge things, to change the way things are. And then Venus in Aquarius, its keyword is detachment. And I would agree with that. Because Venus is about our aesthetic choices. It's also about romance as well. So I think that, like Venus in Aquarius aesthetically tends to be very avant-garde, very different, very unusual. And when it's when we're talking about romance, Venus in Aquarius wants to be romanced through the mind. They like unusual things. They like different people. They want someone to give them, different ideas and expose them to unusual things. So, there is this sense of the energy kind of shifting in a lot of ways from really being a little bit more earthy into this more airy type energy of wanting change, to do things differently, to be more modern, and to move forward. On Wednesday, March 9th, we have Mercury moving into Pisces. So, he was in Aquarius, where he's very much about innovation and ideas and originality. Again, Mercury stands for communication and travel, and he's going to be moving into Pisces. And, Pisces is a sign that is more idealistic, more spiritual, and Mercury communicates through things like songs and poetry and film when he moves into Pisces. So we're going to go find our Mercury cards here. Mercury in Pisces, inspiration is the key word. I would agree with that. Definitely feeling very creatively and artistically inspired for the next few weeks. So this is a good time to, in March, I think, if you have if you're feeling a lot of feelings, if you want to express yourself creatively, this is definitely the time to do it, because Mercury is wanting you to communicate in an artistic way. And then Venus and Mars are also getting you to think in unusual ways, to do things a little bit differently, to step outside the box, that kind of energy. On Thursday, March 10th, we have Vesta, which is the asteroid in charge of home and hearth, but also our spiritual devotion, what we're devoted to, moving into sign of Aquarius. So she's joining up with Mars and Venus and Saturn, and there's also Juno, I think, is also in Aquarius. So a lot of Aquarius energy going on. And so she's asking us, what are we devoted to on an intellectual level? What changes are we making in the world around us community-wise? What are we devoted to in that way? What are we devoted to as far as moving things forward in the name of progress? So she's asking us to look at that as we move further into March. Friday, March 18th, we have our full moon. Our full moon is at 27 degrees of Virgo. And this particular new or full moon is trining, which is an easy aspect with Pluto. So Virgo, whenever we have a full moon, the moon is opposite the sun. So the sun's in Pisces, which is all about dreamy energy and our big vision and spirituality and connecting with others. And Virgo is about the practicality of the day-to-day and our day-to-day routines. It says, okay, you've got a big dream. What are you going to do to actually make that happen? So we're being challenged to take the big dream and start to think about how we're going to practically apply it. There's an opportunity as well with that trine with Pluto to say, how am I going to empower myself and others? How am I going to, I could have this big vision and this fantasy, but how realistic is it? On that day as well, the sun is making a sextile with Pluto. So the sun too is about our focus. So the sun, both the sun and moon are in a harmonious aspect with Pluto. So this is really about empowering ourselves and empowering others on this full moon. So this is a really great full moon to do some prayer work, to pray for others. It's also, sorry, I keep coughing. It is also a good full moon to maybe release some of the things that are, fantasy and kind of ground them a little more in reality. How are we actually going to make that change happen is what this full moon is asking us. On Sunday, March 20th, we have the sun change into Aries, as it does at this time of year. So that's going to be the spring equinox here in the northern hemisphere and the fall equinox in the southern hemisphere. So a day to really, it's some people see this as the new year, the astrological new year. This is a time of energy. It's a time of blessing. It's a time where there's hope and optimism for the future. The sun asks us too to focus on like taking some action in our lives. Like, okay, you've had the winter to dream things. It's spring now. Let's move forward with things. It's not really spring here, but we're getting there. But it's the spring equinox, this time of hopeful energy and rebirth and optimism. On Tuesday, March 22nd, Mars has a square with Uranus. So this is a day where there might be some unusual activity. This is a day where I would say to watch out for as far as things like, I don't want to be alarmist, but things like accidents, cuts, bruises. There's more likely to have that sort of accident energy on this day. So, it's not saying don't do things, but it's just saying like, be careful. Don't get into fights with people. Don't put yourself in unusual situations on the day. I always like to put a little caveat there. But there is sort of this tension and energy that's going on Tuesday, March 22nd, which may be expressed in sort of more negative fashion. So watch for that around that date. And then Sunday, March 27th, we have Mercury changing into the sign of Aries. So he goes from being like kind of more artistic in his communication, more optimistic, to being a little more direct and maybe even a little aggressive at times. And sometimes this can mean, that there might be some arguments and things. We might be a little more argumentative with people. We have here as the keyword restlessness, and I, again, would agree with that. That Mercury, because it's communication, Aries is very like, wants to take action. It's a leader. It goes for things. I think of it always as kind of like the warrior of the zodiac. And so sometimes that means we tend to be warriors with our words, but it can also mean that we're being more assertive. We're being more direct. We're telling people what we want. So the energy is definitely shifting. I think it starts off very intense at the beginning of the month. But there is this like hope and optimism that is going on, which I'm glad to see. And hopefully that will encourage us to take concrete actions that are towards those hopeful goals as we move forward into March. So thank you so much for watching this. If you made it all the way to the end, on my Patreon, just to let you know, I have every week I have a detailed weekly astrology report that I do along with the tarot scope for the signs. So if you want to check that out, you can check it out there. We're also working with Neptune this month on working on developing our intuitive skills. And we are also learning about the runes. So if you want to join us there, you can. And you can check out my Etsy shop too for readings as always. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks to my patrons. You guys are the best. Thank you so, so much. You allow all of this to happen. So thank you. Thank you. And as always, peace and love and rock.